In the 41st millennium, there are no accidents, only the will of the God Emperor, the machinations of chaos, or the cold calculations of ancient Xenos intelligences. When Rick Sanchez's portal tore through the fabric of reality and spat him onto the surface of Forge World Metallica 7, it was none of these things. It was a catastrophic malfunction caused by drinking a flask of interdimensional tequila while recalibrating quantum oscillators. The universe didn't care about Rick's genius or his infinite multiverse credentials. The warp simply saw an opening and pushed back. Rick hit the ferrocrete hard enough to crack his ribs, the cybernetic ones, fortunately, which meant pain but not punctured organs. He rolled onto his back, wheezing, and stared up at a sky the color of infected wounds. 3 moons hung in defiance of orbital mechanics, and the air tasted like machine oil mixed with incense. His portal gun sparked in his hand, the green liquid inside the vial flickering like a dying star. "Oh, burp-tastic," Rick muttered, slapping the device. It whined, coughed out a burst of sparks, and went dark. He ran a quick diagnostic scan with his cybernetic eye implant. The readings made him blink. No quantum signature lock? No dimensional resonance? What kind of universe doesn't have dimensional resonance? Around him, the Forge world stretched in every direction, a landscape of gothic, industrial nightmares. Smokestacks the size of skyscrapers vomited black clouds into the atmosphere. Conveyor systems larger than city blocks hauled raw materials toward cathedral-sized manufactorums, where the sound of hammering metal created a constant, oppressive thunder. And everywhere were symbols, Aquilas, skulls, cogwheels, and high Gothic script proclaiming the glory of something called the Omnisia. Rick struggled to his feet, checking his other gear. Laser pistol, functional. Quantum destabilizer, intact but registering weird readings. Flask, mercifully unbroken. He took a long pull and grimaced. "Okay, Rick, standard procedure. Find civilization, steal their tech, figure out where the hell you are, fix the portal gun, get out. Easy. You've done this 1,000... The sound of heavy footsteps made him turn. 6 figures emerged from the smog, and Rick's first thought was that he'd stumbled onto some kind of cyberpunk cosplay convention for religious fanatics. Each figure stood nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies more machine than flesh. Mechadendrites, mechanical tentacles, writhed from their backs like chrome serpents. Robes the color of dried blood covered frames that clicked and whirred with each movement. Their faces were barely human. Optical implants replaced eyes, Vox grills replaced mouths, and every centimeter of visible skin was inscribed with circuit pattern tattoos that glowed faintly. The lead figure raised a staff crowned with a skull wrapped in copper wire. When it spoke, its voice was a synthesized choir of binary cant overlaid with low Gothic. "Halt, unidentified entity. You bear technology of unknown providence. By the authority of the Adeptus Mechanicus, cult of Mars, you will submit to examination." Rick stared at them. Then he started laughing, a bitter, incredulous sound. "Holy shit. Holy shit. You guys are like if the Amish and the Borg had a baby, and that baby was raised by a doomsday cult." He waved his portal gun at them. "Listen, Chrome Dumbs, I don't have time for whatever techno-religious bullshit you're selling. I need to find a quantum particle accelerator, some exotic matter, and maybe a decent bar, so if you could point me toward..." One of the tech priests lunged forward with surprising speed, mechadendrites lashing out. Rick barely dodged, firing his laser pistol on instinct. The beam struck the tech priest's shoulder, melting through the robe and scorching metal beneath. The figure didn't even flinch. "Weapons discharge detected. Tech heresy confirmed. Initiating capture protocols." "Tech heresy?" Rick backpedaled as the other tech priests advanced. "What are you, the Spanish Inquisition for gadgets? This is just a laser pistol. Every advanced civilization has..." A Makendendrite caught his wrist, another wrapped around his ankle. Rick cursed, reached for his belt, and activated a personal shield generator. The blue field flared to life, and the Makendendrites recoiled with a screech of feedback. The tech priests froze, their optical implants flickering in what might have been shock or religious ecstasy. Conversion field technology, unknown pattern, origin non-imperial. This device, it bears no mark of the Omnissiah's blessing. Heretic! Heretic! Oh, for the love of... Rick threw a micro-singularity grenade at his feet. The small device expanded into a gravity well that yanked the tech priests off balance, buying him 3 seconds. He ran, legs pumping, his scanner painting a HUD overlay across his vision, showing the layout of the Forge World's surface structures. Behind him, the tech priests chanted in binary, their voices rising in mechanical prayer. Rick risked a glance back and saw them recovering faster than they should have, their faith or programming or whatever the hell motivated these cyborg cultists overriding basic physics. He dove behind a massive coolant pipe, breathing hard, and pulled out his scanner for a proper sweep. The data that flooded back made his blood run cold. Psychic energy readings? Off the scale. Not just high, but fundamentally incompatible with his dimensional physics models. There was something out there, something massive, broadcasting a signal that his equipment registered as both electromagnetic and something else, something that made his augmented neurons itch. What the hell is that? He zoomed in on the signal's origin point. His scanner traced it to a fixed point in space, impossibly distant yet somehow present in a way that violated causality. It was like staring at a lighthouse that existed in every dimension simultaneously. Then his scanner caught something else. A secondary reading. Localized. Close. Reality tore. That was the only way Rick's mind could process it. One moment, empty there. The next, a rip, not in space, but in the underlying fabric of what should be. Through the tear came something that his scanner couldn't classify because it kept changing its atomic structure. Flesh that was also liquid, eyes that were also mouths, a smell like burning sugar and rotting meat. The thing giggled. New soul, fresh soul, soul that tastes like stars and screaming. Rick's nihilistic worldview, his scientific certainty, his smug superiority, all of it crashed against a simple, terrible fact. He was looking at something that should not exist, a logical impossibility given form. His hand trembled as he raised his quantum destabilizer and fired. The beam struck the creature and it laughed, its form rippling like water, absorbing the energy and reshaping itself into something with too many arms and a face that looked like his own mother. You opened a door, little scientist. You knocked, and we answered.
Rick's portal gun had torn a micro rift. His technology, designed to punch through dimensional barriers, had brushed against something on the other side. Something that noticed. He ran. Not strategically, not tactically, he just ran. The tech priests were converging from multiple directions, their chants growing louder, but Rick didn't care. He sprinted toward what his scanner identified as a hab block, dove through a doorway, and immediately found himself in a nightmare of Gothic architecture mixed with industrial squalor. Servo skulls, actual human skulls with anti-grav units and optical sensors, floated through corridors lined with prayers stamped into metal. Workers in filthy coveralls shuffled past, their eyes dead, their skin bearing purity seals and circuit tattoos. Everything was skulls and eagles and religious iconography mixed with machinery that looked simultaneously advanced and medieval. Rick found a maintenance alcove, squeezed inside and activated a cloaking field. His breathing was ragged, his hands were shaking. He took a long pull from his flask and closed his eyes. Okay. Analysis. You're in a universe with something. That thing, that impossible thing. Your portal gun is broken. These religious cyborgs think technology without their blessing is heresy. There's a psychic beacon the size of a star broadcasting from somewhere, and reality is apparently negotiable here. He opened his eyes, and they were harder now, focused. Standard procedure isn't gonna cut it. Time for advanced procedure. Figure out what the fuck is going on, exploit it, and get home. He pulled out his scanner and began running deep analysis protocols, searching for any pattern, any logic he could grasp onto. The data that came back was fragmentary, corrupted by that psychic interference, but certain keywords kept appearing in the local data sphere he'd hacked. Emperor, Imperium, Chaos, Warp. Rick Sanchez, the smartest man in infinite universes, had just crashed into the one place where intelligence might not be enough. Outside his hiding spot, the tech priests continued their search, their prayers echoing through the corridors like mechanical ghosts. And in the warp, something ancient and hungry took note of the soul that tasted like infinite possibilities.
Rick spent 6 hours in that maintenance alcove, and in those 6 hours he learned more than most Imperial citizens discovered in their entire miserable lives. His scanner, heavily modified with quantum entanglement processors and probability mapping algorithms, had finally adapted to the local data sphere's encryption. If you could even call it encryption. It was more like technological prayer, machine code written in the form of liturgy, with every subroutine containing devotional headers to something called the amnesia. "These people don't program computers," Rick muttered, scrolling through lines of code that made his eye twitch. "They pray to them? And the computers, they actually listen." He took another drink. "That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works." But it did work. The Forge World systems operated on principles that violated causality, thermodynamics, and basic logic. Machine spirits, actual fragments of consciousness inhabiting technology, responded to ritual and faith more reliably than proper maintenance. Rick had watched through hacked surveillance feeds as a tech priest repaired a plasma generator not by replacing the damaged cooling system, but by anointing it with sacred oils while chanting binary hymns. The generator worked afterward. "Faith-based engineering," Rick said, his voice hollow. "I'm in a universe where believing hard enough makes things real. That's actually horrifying." His deep scan of the local data sphere had pulled up fragmented historical records, propaganda broadcasts, and imperial doctrine files. The picture they painted was of a galaxy-spanning theocratic empire built on the corpse of reason itself. Humanity had reached technological heights that surpassed most civilizations Rick had encountered, then deliberately destroyed that knowledge in favor of religious dogma. They worshipped a 10,000-year-old corpse as a god. They fed him 10,000 psychic souls daily to keep him not even alive, just barely functional enough to power that massive psychic lighthouse. The Astronomicon, that was what the beacon was called. A psychic navigation light that allowed faster-than-light travel through something called the warp. And that's where Rick's scientific understanding hit a wall made of existential horror. The warp wasn't hyperspace. It wasn't subspace. It wasn't any kind of dimensional shortcut he'd encountered in thousands of realities. It was a parallel dimension made of raw psychic energy, where thought and emotion became manifest, where collective belief literally created gods, and where the laws of physics were suggestions at best. Psychic dimension. Psychic dimension. Rick laughed again, but there was a manic edge to it now. A universe where consciousness affects reality at a fundamental level, where faith has measurable physical effects. That thing I saw, that impossible thing, it came from there. The warp. His scanner had picked up more data on warp entities. Demons, they were called. Creatures made of emotion and belief, fragments of vast psychic entities that humanity's own despair, rage, ambition, and excess had created. 4 major gods, Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh, each representing fundamental aspects of sentient psychology taken to nightmarish extremes.
Rick understood now why his portal gun had failed. It didn't just punch through dimensional barriers, it created quantum tunnels that exploited the mathematical consistency of reality. But the warp wasn't consistent. It was chaos in the most literal sense. His portal gun had tried to establish a stable connection through a dimension where stability itself was a foreign concept, and the warp had responded like an immune system attacking a virus. Worse, his attempt had created a microscopic tear, a tiny opening, just enough for something to notice him. His scanner beeped, movement detected. The tech priests were doing a systematic sweep of the hab block using auspex scanners and servo skulls to search every alcove and maintenance shaft. Rick checked his cloaking field, still functional, but the power cell was down to 40%. In this universe, he couldn't just stop at Radio Shack for a replacement battery. Time to move. Rick slipped out of the alcove, using his scanner's predictive algorithms to map the tech priest's search pattern. He moved through corridors lined with devotional texts, past workers who shuffled along like zombies, their lives consumed by endless shifts in the manufactorums. He passed a public execution where a man was being burned alive for tech heresy. Apparently, he'd tried to modify his lasgun without proper ritual. The crowd watched with dead eyes, too exhausted to care. "Jesus Christ," Rick whispered. "This place makes the Citadel look like a libertarian paradise." He found what he was looking for in a sub-level data repository, a cogitator bank, what passed for a computer system in this backwards nightmare. The machine was the size of a car, covered in prayer scrolls and purity seals, attended by 2 tech priests who were performing some kind of data blessing ceremony. Rick waited until they turned their backs, then moved. Laser pistol set to stun. He didn't need these religious fanatics martyring themselves and drawing attention. 2 quick shots, both priests down. He plugged a data spike into the cogitator's interface port and let his custom AI start pulling information. What he needed was specific, detailed information about the warp, about navigation through it, and most importantly, about any civilization or technology that could interact with it without going insane. If he was going to fix his portal gun to work in a universe where psychic phenomena corrupted quantum mechanics, he needed to understand the rules. The data spike worked fast, quantum processors sifting through terabytes of imperial propaganda, technical documents, and forbidden knowledge that the Mechanicus had locked behind encryption they thought was unbreakable. Rick's AI cracked it in 40 seconds. Then the screaming started. Not from the cogitator, from inside Rick's head. His cybernetic implants, designed to process information at superhuman speeds, suddenly felt like they were on fire. The data wasn't just data, it was alive. Every file about the warp contained trace amounts of psychic energy, digital echoes of the horrors they described, and his implants were directly interfacing with them. Rick saw things, flashes of images that couldn't exist. Towers made of screaming faces, oceans of blood where demons swam, a vast crystalline maze that existed in 9 dimensions simultaneously, gardens of plague where flowers sang songs of entropy, a palace of excess where every pleasure led to agony. You seek knowledge, little scientist? We are knowledge. We are understanding. We are the truth behind your precious logic. Rick yanked the data spike out, gasping, his vision swimming. Blood trickled from his nose. His cybernetic eye was glitching, overlaying impossible geometries across his normal vision. He stumbled backward, caught himself against the wall. No, 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 no. He fumbled for a neural stabilizer from his coat, jammed it against his temple, and hit the trigger. The device flooded his brain with carefully calibrated electromagnetic pulses, disrupting the psychic interference. The visions faded, but slowly, reluctantly, like they didn't want to leave. Rick's hands were shaking worse now.
He'd interfaced with eldritch entities before. Hell, he'd created a few. But those operated on rules, even if the rules were weird. This was different. The warp didn't just break reality, it mocked it. It was everything his scientific worldview said was impossible. And it was winning. His scanner beeped urgently. Multiple contacts incoming. The tech priests had detected his intrusion.
Rick ran, data spike still clutched in his hand. He'd gotten what he needed, even if accessing it had nearly cost him his sanity. The files contained references to something crucial, ancient technology created by a race called the Necrons, technology that could nullify the warp's influence. Blackstone, they called it, a material that existed in real space but somehow rejected psychic energy. If Rick could get his hands on Blackstone, he could modify his portal gun to resist warp interference. He could create a stable dimensional tunnel even in this nightmare universe. He just had to find a 60-million-year-old alien tomb and convince whatever lived inside to share. "Standard Tuesday," Rick muttered, sprinting through corridors as alarm klaxons began to wail behind him. He burst through a doorway onto an observation deck and stopped dead. The view stretched out before him. The entire Forge world laid bare. A planetary surface completely covered in industrial complexes, smokestacks, and Gothic cathedrals to the machine god. Billions of souls labored in darkness, their lives measured in productivity quotas and purity seals. In the distance, orbital elevators stretched into space, feeding the Imperium's endless war machine. And above it all, visible even through the toxic atmosphere, Rick's enhanced vision could make out ships, dozens of them, massive cathedral vessels kilometers long, bristling with weapon batteries and covered in gold aquillas. They hung in orbit like judgmental gods. One ship in particular caught his attention. Smaller than the others, sleeker, painted black with a stylized eye emblazoned on its hull. His scanner identified it immediately from the data he'd stolen, an Inquisition vessel. Ugh, fantastic. The secret police are here because this day wasn't complete without space fascist thought cops. His scanner detected a powerful, directed scan originating from that ship. Someone was looking for him. Someone with technology sophisticated enough to partially pierce his cloaking field. Behind him, the tech priests were getting closer, their binary chanting echoing through the corridors like a mechanized hunting call. Ahead, the Inquisition was narrowing their search. And somewhere in the spaces between reality, things made of belief and hunger were taking notice of the soul that had touched the warp and survived. Rick Sanchez pulled out his flask, drained it, and made a decision. He couldn't fight his way out, not against an entire Forge world and an Inquisition kill team. He couldn't hide forever. His cloaking field would fail eventually. And he couldn't fix his portal gun without resources he didn't have. Which meant he needed to do something he absolutely hated. He needed to talk to someone. Find an ally, or at least someone he could manipulate. Someone who might have access to information about the Necrons and their warp-resistant technology. His scanner pinged. One contact, approaching alone, moving with purpose but not hostility. Human baseline, augmented with standard Imperial cybernetics, wearing powered armor. The energy signature matched an inquisitorial acolyte. Rick stepped out of the shadows, hands raised, portal gun conspicuously holstered. "All right, space cop, let's talk before this gets, unnecessarily violent. I've got information you want, and you've got resources I need. So how about we skip the part where you try to torture me for heresy and jump straight to the part where I dazzle you with my genius?" The acolyte emerged from the corridor, stormbolter raised, helmet scanning him with auger arrays. When she spoke, her voice was cold, professional, and utterly convinced of her authority. "Rick Sanchez, the Inquisitor would speak with you. Comply or be sanctioned. The Emperor protects, but my bolt rounds protect better." Rick grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, that's what I thought. Lead the way, sister. But fair warning, your boss is about to get an education in how little the Emperor actually protects against someone who understands dimensional mechanics."
The inquisitorial shuttle was exactly what Rick expected. Oppressively gothic, unnecessarily ornate, and covered in enough religious iconography to make a cathedral jealous. Skulls served as control interfaces. The seats were carved from what looked like actual bone. Prayer scrolls dangled from every surface, swaying with the shuttle's movement like macabre wind chimes. Even the pilot, a servitor, which Rick's scanner identified as a lobotomized human turned into a biological robot, had devotional text carved into its exposed skull. "You people have serious aesthetic issues," Rick said, strapped into a restraint harness that felt more like an Iron Maiden without the spikes. "Like, I've been to dimensions where they worship pain gods, and even they think this is excessive." The inquisitorial acolyte, she'd identified herself as Sister Veridiana of the Ordo Xenos, didn't respond. She stood across from him in full power armor, stormbolter mag-locked to her thigh, her helmet's eye lenses glowing a faint amber. Two more acolytes flanked her, both armed, both watching Rick like he might spontaneously combust into daemons. They weren't wrong to be paranoid. Rick's scanner had detected trace warp contamination on his clothing from that brief encounter with the demon. In this universe, that was apparently enough to warrant summary execution. The shuttle broke atmosphere, and through the viewport, Rick got his first real look at the Imperium's orbital infrastructure. It was horrifying in its scale. Dozens of warships, each the size of a small city, hung in formation around the Forge world. Orbital defense platforms bristled with weapon batteries that could glass continents. And everywhere, those same repeated symbols: the two-headed eagle, the skull, the cogwheel. "Compensating for something?" Rick muttered. "I mean, the guns I get, but why does every ship need 50-story tall statues of angry dudes with swords?" "Silence, heretic," one of the acolytes said. His voice was young, fervent. "You stand accused of tech heresy, unlicensed dimensional manipulation, and consorting with warp entities. Your words only deepen your damnation." Rick laughed. "Kid, I've been damned by things that make your warp entities look like angry goldfish. You want to know what real damnation looks like? It's realizing that consciousness is just chemical reactions pretending they matter, that free will is an illusion, and that the universe will continue exactly the same whether you exist or not. That's damnation. Your space hell is just therapy with extra tentacles." Sister Veridiana's hand moved to her bolter. "Another word, and I will exercise my authority to sanction you before the Inquisitor wastes her time." Rick raised his hand in mock surrender, but his mind was racing. He'd pulled significant data from that cogitator bank, and his implants had processed it during the shuttle ride, despite the psychic contamination. What he'd learned painted a picture that was somehow worse than he'd initially thought. The Imperium of Man wasn't just a theocratic empire. It was a civilization in terminal decline, held together by nothing but faith, brutality, and the rotting corpse of a being they called the God Emperor. 10,000 years ago, humanity had achieved technological heights that Rick's own inventions looked quaint. They'd created thinking machines, mastered genetic engineering, and conquered the galaxy during something called the Dark Age of Technology. Then they'd destroyed it all, deliberately. During something called the Age of Strife, artificial intelligences had rebelled. Warp storms had isolated human worlds for millennia. And by the time the Emperor, then still acknowledged as just an incredibly powerful human, had reunified humanity, the decision was made. Technology would be controlled through religious dogma. Innovation would be heresy. Understanding would be replaced with ritual. The Mechanikus maintained what technology remained, but they didn't understand it. They worshipped it. Standard template construct systems, ancient databases containing blueprints for Dark Age tech, were treated as holy relics. The idea of improving technology was blasphemy. Humanity had deliberately shackled itself, choosing ignorance over the risk of another AI rebellion. "You're all idiots," Rick said quietly. "You had it all, and you threw it away because you were scared of your own creations. Do you know how many civilizations I've seen do that? Exactly 0, because they all died. You're just taking longer." The shuttle docked with the inquisitorial vessel, the unrelenting truth, according to the ship's transponder. The interior was more of the same. Gothic arches, flickering candles despite the presence of electric lighting, and enough skulls to stock a Halloween warehouse. Rick was escorted through corridors lined with cells where he caught glimpses of other prisoners, mutants, suspected heretics, a thing that might have been human once but was now mostly tentacles. He was brought to a chamber that was clearly designed for interrogation. A single chair with heavy restraints sat in the center, surrounded by equipment that Rick's scanner identified as crude but effective torture devices, some mechanical, some psychic. On the walls, purity seals and prayers to the Emperor covered every surface. But what caught Rick's attention was the woman waiting for him. Inquisitor Kasia Valorian was tall, augmented with cybernetic implants that were more sophisticated than the Mechanicus standard, and carried herself with the absolute certainty of someone who'd executed thousands and never lost a night's sleep over it. Her left eye was a complex augmetic that bathed Rick in scanning light. Her right hand was encased in a power fist that hummed with barely restrained energy. She wore a long coat decorated with the symbol of the Inquisition, a stylized eye with a skull in the center, and at her hip hung a bolt pistol that Rick's scanner identified as mastercrafted, possibly containing sanctified ammunition. She studied Rick for a long moment, her human eye calculating, her mechanical eye recording every detail. "Rick Sanchez," she said finally. Her voice was measured, educated, with an accent Rick couldn't place. "You are an anomaly. Your technology bears no resemblance to any STC pattern. Your dimensional breach on the Forge world registered on our aetheric sensors as a Class 3 warp incursion. And yet," she tilted her head, "you survive contact with a warp entity with your soul intact? Unprecedented." Rick slumped in the chair, making a show of boredom despite the very real danger. "Yeah, well, I've got a high tolerance for impossible bullshit. Comes from being the smartest man in..." He stopped, recalculated. "Several universes. Not this one, apparently, since you people deliberately made yourselves stupid."
Sister Viridiana moved forward, bolt pistol raised. "Inquisitor, he blasphemes." Kasia raised a hand and Viridiana froze. "Answer my questions truthfully and I will consider allowing you to continue existing. Lie and I will hand you to the Mechanicus for exploratory disassembly. Where did you come from?" "Another dimension, not the warp, an actual parallel universe where physics works like it's supposed to. I was trying to map an unexplored dimensional cluster when my portal gun malfunctioned and dumped me here."
Your portal gun, the device you carry, it creates stable dimensional tunnels? Created, past tense, your warp bullshit corrupted the quantum entanglement matrix. Now it's just an expensive paperweight until I can recalibrate it with materials that don't exist in your technological dark age. Cassia's mechanical eye whirred, intently focusing. You claim to have mastered dimensional travel, technology that the Imperium lost millennia ago, technology that the ancient enemy uses to plague our reality. She leaned forward. You will provide us with this knowledge. The Ordo Xenos has use for weapons against the warp. Rick laughed, genuinely laughed. That's adorable. You think I'm just going to hand over dimensional mechanics to a fascist theocracy that uses lobotomized humans as computers? Lady, I've seen your solutions to problems. They involve either prayer, flamethrowers, or virus bombing entire planets from orbit. You're not getting my tech. The temperature in the room dropped. Cassia's expression didn't change, but her power fist began to glow with building energy. You misunderstand your situation, Xenos construct. You are not in a position to refuse. Xenos? Rick blinked. I'm human, you... He stopped as his scanner parsed the insult. In Imperial terminology, Xenos meant alien. They thought he was an alien intelligence in a human shell. Oh, you think I'm not human because I'm too smart. That's consistent with your stupid ideology. Your technology proves your origins lie beyond the Emperor's domain. Therefore, you are Xenos. Therefore, you fall under my Ordo's jurisdiction. Therefore, your existence continues only as long as you provide value. She nodded to Viridiana. Prep the neural interrogation rig. We'll extract what we need. Rick's facade of boredom cracked. Neural interrogation. His cybernetic implants, already contaminated with trace warp energy from the cogitator interface, would light up like a Christmas tree under psychic probing. If they tried to forcibly extract information, they'd get more than they bargained for. They'd potentially open another warp rift, this time inside the ship, and the demons would come pouring through. Time to change tactics. Wait, Rick said. Before you do something catastrophically stupid, let me show you what I found on the Forge world. He gestured to the data spike still on his belt. I hacked your Mechanicus cogitator banks. Got information about your real problem, the reason your Imperium is dying. Cassia's eyes narrowed. Speak quickly. Your Emperor? 10,000 years on that throne, getting weaker every day? You feed him souls, but it's not enough anymore, is it? The Astromanicon flickers. Warp storms are getting worse. Demonic incursions increasing. You're losing. The Emperor protects, Viridiana said reflexively, but there was uncertainty in her voice.
The Emperor is failing, Rick corrected, and you know it. Your Inquisition probably has projections. How long before the Astronomicon fails completely? 50 years? 100? What happens to your Imperium when FTL travel becomes impossible? Cassia was silent, which was answer enough. Rick pressed his advantage. But there's another civilization in this galaxy that solved the warp problem. 60 million years ago, they built technology that could nullify psychic energy, create bubbles of real space where the warp couldn't touch them. The Necrons. The Necrontier, Cassia said, and for the first time, Rick heard genuine fear in her voice. Soulless alien abominations, you would have us treat with the undying? I would have you learn from them, Rick said. Look, I don't care about your Imperium. I don't care about your religious fascism or your corpse god or any of this grim dark nonsense. I want to fix my portal gun and leave. But to do that, I need Blackstone, the material the Necrons use to build their warp-resistant tech. You want weapons against chaos? I can reverse engineer Necron technology, create devices that could protect entire systems from warp corruption. All I need is access to a Necron tomb world and enough resources to work.
Cassia studied him for a long moment. Behind her, Viridiana and the other acolytes shifted uncomfortably. What Rick was proposing was heresy on multiple levels, treating with Xenos, seeking forbidden technology, potentially endangering the entire subsector. But Rick could see the calculation in Cassia's human eye. The Inquisition's entire purpose was to protect humanity from threats both internal and external. If Rick was telling the truth, if he could actually create warp-resistant technology. "There is a Necron tomb world," she said slowly. 3 systems from here, dormant for millennia until a Mechanicus Explorator fleet accidentally triggered its defenses 2 years ago. The Ordo Xenos has kept it contained, but she paused. "You're proposing we infiltrate an active Necron tomb world, steal their technology, and somehow convince you to cooperate in creating weapons for the Imperium?" "No," Rick said. "I'm proposing we talk to the Necrons, trade knowledge for knowledge. They're logical, right? Ancient. They might actually be intelligent enough to have a conversation with." Viridiana made a sound of disgust. "The Xenos cannot be reasoned with. The Emperor teaches the Emperor is a corpse on a throne, and his teachings are why humanity is losing. You want to survive, you need to start thinking like scientists again, instead of scared children praying in the dark." The room went deadly silent. Rick had just committed blasphemy on a level that normally resulted in immediate execution. He watched Cassia's power fist, waiting to see if she'd simply vaporize him. Instead, she smiled. It was a cold, calculating expression that reminded Rick of himself. "You're either the most valuable asset we've encountered in a century, or the most dangerous heretic in the entire subsector. Possibly both." She deactivated her power fist. "Very well, Rick Sanchez. I will grant you an opportunity to prove your worth. We will travel to the Necron tomb world. You will demonstrate your ability to interface with their technology. And if you succeed," she leaned in close, "you will build weapons for the Imperium, or I will personally ensure your death is lengthy and educational." Rick met her gaze and grinned. "Deal. But when this goes sideways, and it will go sideways because everything in this universe is cosmically fucked, remember that I warned you." Cassia turned to her acolytes. "Prepare the ship for warp transit, set course for the Mortis sector, and someone find our guest more suitable accommodations. I want him alive and functional." As they escorted Rick out of the interrogation chamber, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd bought time, gained resources, and positioned himself to access the one thing in this nightmare universe that might actually help him. Necron technology that could resist the warp. All he had to do was meet a species of genocidal robot skeletons who'd been murdering organic life for 60 million years. Standard Tuesday," Rick muttered again. Behind him, unseen by anyone in the physical realm, things made of spite and hunger watched from the spaces between reality. The mortal who'd touched the warp was moving deeper into their domain, and they were patient. They could wait. After all, every soul broke eventually.
The warp transit took 3 days, and Rick spent every miserable second of it learning why the Imperium's faster-than-light travel was an affront to sanity itself. He'd been given quarters, a cell really, but with a cot and a sink, deep in the unrelenting truth's lower decks. The ship's Geller field, a psychic barrier designed to keep the warp from flooding into real space, hummed constantly with a frequency that made his teeth ache. His cybernetic implants picked up things, whispers at the edge of perception, scratching sounds that came from inside the walls, shadows that moved independently of any light source. "This is how you people travel," Rick said to himself on the second day, pacing his cell while his scanner showed impossible readings.
You throw yourself into a dimension made of literal nightmares, hope your psychic force field holds, and pray to your corpse god that nothing notices you. This is the stupidest form of FTL I've ever seen, and I once met a species that achieved light speed by having everyone on the ship wish really hard. The food was corpse starch, compressed protein bars that tasted like cardboard, mixed with despair. The water was heavily recycled and tasted metallic. Everything was designed for function, not comfort. The Imperium didn't care if its servants were happy. It cared if they were productive. Rick had used the time productively, though. Sister Viridiana had confiscated most of his equipment, but they'd missed the subdermal data storage implant in his forearm. He'd uploaded the stolen Mechanicus files there before they caught him, and now he spent hours reviewing everything he could about the Necrons. What he learned was simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. The Necron tier had been a biological species once, living on a radiation-blasted world orbiting a cancer-causing star. Their lifespans were short, their bodies constantly failing, and they'd become the galaxy's most bitter, resentful civilization. When they'd encountered the Old Ones, an ancient race of psychic beings who'd seeded life across the galaxy, the Necron tier had begged for the secret of immortality. The Old Ones refused. So the Necron tier went to war, and lost badly. In desperation, they'd made a deal with beings called the C'tan, star gods, fragments of reality given consciousness. The C'tan offered immortality through biotransference, uploading Necron tier consciousness into living metal, bodies, eternal life, indestructible forms, power beyond measure. The entire species had agreed. Trillions of Necron tier transferred their minds into machines, becoming the Necrons. And the C'tan had lied. The transfer process had stripped away most of their consciousness, reducing the majority to mindless automatons. Only the nobility retained their full intelligence, and even they had lost something fundamental, the ability to feel, to truly experience existence. They traded mortality for a hollow eternity. Jesus, Rick whispered, reading the data. They got monkey's pawed by their own technology. That's exactly what I'd expect from a species desperate enough to trust godlike entities. But the Necrons had won their war. They'd created technology so advanced it made the Imperiums look like stone tools. Weapons that could detonate stars, warships that phased through dimensions, and most importantly for Rick's purposes, the Blackstone pylons, structures that could suppress warp activity across entire sectors. Then they'd turned on the C-10, shattered them into fragments, and imprisoned those fragments in tesseract labyrinths. After that, exhausted from millions of years of war, they'd gone to sleep in vast tomb worlds waiting for the galaxy to quiet down so they could reclaim it. That was 60 million years ago, and now they were waking up, finding the galaxy overrun with primitive organic life, and they were pissed. So my plan, Rick said to the empty cell, is to walk into a tomb full of angry robot skeletons who hate organic life and convince them to trade technology with me. This is either brilliant or suicidal, and I genuinely can't tell which.
They escorted Rick to the ship's bridge, and he got his first proper look at Imperial void warfare infrastructure. The bridge was a cathedral in miniature, vaulted ceilings covered in devotional texts, crew pits where hundreds of servitors and human operators managed ancient controls, and at the center, a command throne where Inquisitor Cassia sat like a judge pronouncing sentence on the void itself.
Massive view screens showed the tomb world below. It was a death world in the most literal sense, barren, airless, its surface covered in geometric patterns that could only be Necron architecture. Pyramidal structures, kilometers tall, jutted from the landscape. Energy discharges flickered between them like artificial lightning. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Cassius said without looking at Rick. "The Mechanicus calls this world Mortis 7. The Necrons likely have another name for it, written in mathematics we can't comprehend." She gestured, and the view screen zoomed in on a specific structure. "That is our target, a tomb entrance the Explorator fleet breached 2 years ago. Our reconnaissance indicates minimal Necron activity. Most of the tomb remains dormant." "Minimal activity," Rick repeated. "How many minimal killer robots are we talking about?" Preliminary Auspect scans detected 17 active Necron warriors, 3 constructs we've classified as immortals, and 1 potential command unit. Cassia turned to face him. "Your task is simple. Access their technology, demonstrate your claimed expertise, and retrieve data on their Blackstone applications. My kill team will provide support." Rick studied the view screen, his implants running probability calculations. 17 warriors plus support units. In any other universe, that would be manageable. But these were Necrons. Each warrior was effectively indestructible, capable of regenerating from catastrophic damage through something called reanimation protocols. Their weapons were Gauss flares that stripped targets atom by atom, and if they detected a significant threat, they could wake up more of their tomb. "I need my equipment back. All of it. I can't, interface with alien technology using harsh language and good intentions." Cassia considered this. "Your weapons will be returned, though I'm assigning Sister Viridania to monitor you. Any sign of treachery, and she will execute you immediately. Understood?" "Crystal clear, Space Cop." An hour later, Rick stood in the Unrelenting Truth's armory, reclaiming his confiscated gear. Portal gun, still non-functional, but he wasn't leaving it behind. Laser pistol, quantum destabilizer, various gadgets and devices that the Mechanicus had examined with the reverence normally reserved for holy relics. They'd been terrified to actually test anything, afraid it might be demon-possessed technology. Your civilization peaked millennia ago, and you're so scared of progress, you'd rather stay ignorant. You know what that makes you? Cosmically irrelevant. The only reason you're not extinct is because the galaxy is too busy dealing with worse problems. You speak heresy with remarkable casuality, Sister Viridiana said from behind him. She'd removed her helmet, revealing a woman in her 30s with a shaved head covered in devotional tattoos and a bionic eye that matched her Inquisitor's sophistication. "Do you not fear the Emperor's judgment?" "I don't fear things that can't hurt me," Rick said. "Your Emperor is a corpse, a very powerful, psychically active corpse, sure, but still dead. And before you shoot me for blasphemy, consider this. If your God is so great, why does he need 10,000 human souls a day just to keep the lights on?" Viridana's hand moved to her bolt pistol, but she didn't draw. Rick could see the conflict in her eyes, faith warring with doubt. That was the problem with true believers. Show them evidence that contradicted their worldview, either they doubled down or they broke completely. "The Emperor protects," she said finally, but it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. The kill team assembled in the launch bay. Sister Viridana, 4 inquisitorial stormtroopers in carapace armor carrying hellguns, and a tech priest named Magos Zenith, who'd been assigned to document any archaeotech they recovered. The Magos was more machine than man, his body a writhing mass of mechanohydrites and augmetics, his face hidden behind a brass mask inscribed with binary cant. "The Omniscia guides our path,"
he intoned, his voice a mechanical rasp. "Though we walk among the works of the heathen machine, we shall remain pure." "Yeah, good luck with that," Rick said. "You're about to see technology that makes your best toys look like, Fisher-Price products. Try not to have a religious crisis." They boarded a Valkyrie assault carrier, a utilitarian troop transport that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought aerodynamics was heresy. The pilot, another servitor with most of its brain replaced by a cogitator, flew them down through Morta 7's thin atmosphere with mechanical precision.
The landing was rough. The Valkyrie's landing struts crunched against Necron metal that had withstood 60 million years without corrosion. The assault ramp dropped, and Rick got his first direct look at Necron architecture. It was perfect, geometrically flawless, every angle precisely calculated, every surface smooth as glass, every structure positioned with mathematical exactitude. The pyramid before them rose 3 kilometers into the black sky, its surface covered in glyphs that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Green energy pulsed through channels carved into the metal, following patterns that Rick's implants identified as both power conduits and data streams. "They built this before humans existed," Rick said quietly. "Before your species figured out fire, these guys were creating structures that would last until the heat death of the universe. That's pretty impressive." The tomb entrance yawned before them, a perfect triangular opening 20 meters tall. Darkness lay beyond, broken only by occasional flickers of green light. Rick's scanner detected significant energy readings deeper in the structure, but more concerning were 17 distinct heat signatures, too cold to be human, too organized to be random decay. The Necron warriors were active, patrolling the outer chambers. "Standard kill team protocol," Viridiana ordered. "Weapons free. Target anything that moves. Sanchez, you stay in the center of formation. Your value is informational, not combative." Rick checked his laser pistol's charge. "Lady, I've survived the Galactic Federation, the Council of Ricks, and a telepathic space fetus that wanted to turn me into a museum exhibit. I think I can handle some robot skeletons." They entered the tomb. The interior was just as perfect as the exterior. Corridors stretched into darkness, lit by strips of luminescent material that responded to their presence, growing brighter as they approached. The walls were covered in more of those shifting glyphs. Necron language, Rick realized, a form of communication that existed in 4 dimensions simultaneously. His scanner went wild, detecting technology that shouldn't be possible. Power sources with 0 energy loss, materials that existed in superposition states, quantum processors that made his own implants look like abacuses. This was Dark Age of technology level advancement, maybe beyond it. "Contact," one of the stormtroopers whispered in the Vox. "Movement, 30 meters ahead." Rick saw it a moment later, a silhouette emerging from the darkness. Humanoid, roughly 2 meters tall, skeletal frame made of living metal that gleamed like dark silver. Its eyes, if you could call them eyes, burned with sickly green energy. In its hands, it carried a weapon that crackled with contained power. A Necron warrior, and it had noticed them. The warrior raised its weapon, and reality screamed. The Gauss flare fired, and one of the stormtroopers simply unraveled. His atoms were stripped away layer by layer, flesh and armor dissolving into component particles that dispersed into the air. He didn't even have time to scream. "Engage!" Viridiana roared, her stormbolter thundering. Mass reactive shells slammed into the Necron warrior, blasting chunks of living metal from its frame. It staggered, but didn't fall. Green energy coursed through its body, and the damage began to repair itself in real time. Rick watched, fascinated despite the danger.
Reanimation protocols. Self-repairing nanomachines integrated into the metal itself. That's actually genius. Two more warriors emerged from side corridors. The stormtroopers' hell guns lit up the darkness, laser beams punching through Necron frames. Mago Zenith deployed his mechadendrites, firing plasma bursts from integrated weapons. The tomb filled with violence and light. But the Necrons kept coming, and with each warrior that fell, Rick's scanner detected more energy signatures activating deeper in the structure. They were waking up the tomb. "We need to move," Rick shouted. "Every second we spend fighting, more of them wake up. We need to reach the command center before—" A voice cut through the chaos. Not spoken aloud, transmitted directly into Rick's cybernetic implants in a language that wasn't language. A series of mathematical concepts that his brain interpreted as words. Identify. State purpose. This tomb is sovereign territory of the Sautek dynasty. Organic trespassers will be eradicated. Rick's eyes widened. That wasn't a warrior speaking. That was something with actual intelligence. Something that could communicate.
He pushed forward, past Viridiana's protestations, and shouted into the darkness. "Rick Sanchez, I'm here to, talk. I have information about dimensional mechanics and warp-resistant technology. I want to trade knowledge." The shooting stopped. The Necron warriors froze mid-motion, their weapons still raised but not firing. In the sudden silence, Rick heard the sound of something heavy approaching from deeper in the tomb, footsteps that rang with mechanical precision. From the darkness emerged a figure that made the warriors look like children's toys. 3 meters tall, its frame was more ornate, covered in glyphs and hieroglyphics that told the story of ancient conquests. Its skull face was noble, almost regal, and in its hand it carried a staff crowned with crackling energy. A tattered cloak made from some impossible material hung from its shoulders. A Necron overlord, a noble who'd retained full consciousness through biotransference. The overlord stopped 10 meters away and regarded Rick with eyes that burned with cold intelligence. When it spoke, the mathematical concepts flowing into Rick's mind were tinged with something that might have been curiosity. A human with augmented consciousness, crude neural implants attempting to process hyperdimensional communication. Fascinating. You claim to possess knowledge of dimensional manipulation. Rick met that ancient gaze and grinned. Yeah, I've traveled across infinite universes, mapped dimensional clusters, and built technology that lets me walk between realities like you're changing channels. And I know you're interested because your civilization spent millions of years trying to escape the Cetan's influence, and dimensional travel was the one thing you never mastered. The Overlord's eyes flickered. Behind it, the warriors remained frozen, awaiting demands. You know of the Cetan. Interesting. Most organic species have forgotten the star gods, lost to the entropy of time. What do you want, dimensional traveler? Speak quickly. My patience for organic life is measured in microseconds. Rick took a breath. This was it. The gambit that would either save him or get him atomized. I want Blackstone, the material you used to build your anti-warp pylons. I need it to repair my dimensional technology, which your tomb's energy signature damaged. In exchange, I'll give you information about the warp's current state, the location of Cetan shards in this sector, and schematics for technology that could help you reclaim this galaxy from the organic infestation you hate so much. The Overlord was silent for a long moment. Behind Rick, he could hear Viridiana's breathing through her armor, rapid and tense. The stormtroopers' weapons were still trained on the Necrons, though they knew any shooting would be suicide now. Finally, the Overlord spoke.
You offer information about the C'tan, the betrayers, the deceivers who stole our flesh and gave us this eternal prison. Its eyes burned brighter. This interests us, but you are organic, you decay, you lie. Why should the Sautek dynasty trust the words of a creature that will be dust in mere decades? Rick pulled out his data spike and held it up. Because I can prove it. I've got data pulled from the Imperium's cogitator banks, information about C'tan shard locations, containment facilities, even some theories about their fundamental nature. I'll share it all. All I want is some blackstone and safe passage out of your tomb. The Overlord extended a skeletal hand. Energy crackled around its fingers. If you speak truth, you will have your blackstone. If you lie, it energized. We will add your atoms to our collection. Rick looked at the offered hand. This was the moment. Trust a 60-million-year-old alien intelligence that hated organic life, or try to fight his way out against impossible odds. He tossed the data spike to the Overlord. The Necron Lord caught it with inhuman speed, inserted it into a port in its chest, and its eyes went dark as it processed the information. The seconds stretched into subjective eternity. Rick could hear his own heartbeat, loud in the silence. Then the Overlord's eyes blazed back to life, brighter than before. Acceptable. Your data is valid. C'tan signatures confirmed. Dimensional theory crude but functional. The Overlord turned to its warriors and transmitted commands in bursts of mathematical concepts. The warriors lowered their weapons and stepped aside. You will follow us to the processing chambers. We will provide blackstone samples. In exchange, you will answer questions about this warp phenomenon your data references. The immaterial was not so active when we entered stasis. Its current state concerns us. Rick couldn't believe it had actually worked. He'd negotiated with the Necrons. He'd talked his way past killer robots through pure intellectual exchange. Deal. Lead the way, Metal Man. As they walked deeper into the tomb, following the Overlord through corridors that hadn't seen organic life in epochs, Rick caught Viridiana's expression. She looked shell-shocked, her faith-based worldview cracking under the reality of what she'd just witnessed. Her charge successfully treating with Xenos, heresy of the highest order. But Rick didn't care. He was going to get his Blackstone, fix his portal gun, and get the hell out of this grimdark nightmare. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that deeper in the tomb, ancient systems were awakening. The Overlord had been alone for so long, commanding only mindless warriors. But Rick's mention of the C'tan had triggered protocols dormant for millions of years. And somewhere in the tomb's core, something that had been sleeping was beginning to wake up. Something that remembered the taste of souls back when the Necrons still had them.
The processing chambers existed in a section of the tomb that hurt to look at directly. Rick's cybernetic eye kept trying to adjust for perspective, but the geometry refused to cooperate. Corridors intersected at angles that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Doorways opened into rooms that were somehow larger on the inside than the outside. The Necrons had built their infrastructure using principles that treated Euclidean geometry as a suggestion. This is actually making me nauseous, Rick said, one hand pressed against a wall that felt solid but registered on his scanner as existing in a quantum superposition. You guys built architecture that violates causality. That's horrifying, but also kind of impressive. The Overlord, who'd identified itself through mathematical transmission as Overlord Ahmontek of the Sautek dynasty, moved through the impossible spaces with ease. Its skeletal frame phased slightly with each step, existing fractionally out of sync with normal space-time. Your organic neural architecture is insufficiently adapted for hyperdimensional perception.
Ahmontek transmitted. When we possessed flesh, we too experienced disorientation. One of the few advantages of biotransference, our consciousness now processes 12 dimensions simultaneously. Yeah, well, 12 dimensions sounds great until you realize you traded your ability to feel anything for the privilege. You can't taste food, can't feel warmth, can't experience pleasure. You're just processing information forever. That's not immortality, that's hell with better math. The Overlord, who'd identified itself through mathematical transmission as Overlord Ahmontek of the Sautek dynasty, moved through the impossible spaces with ease. Its skeletal frame phased slightly with each step, existing fractionally out of sync with normal space-time. Your organic neural architecture is insufficiently adapted for hyperdimensional perception, Ahmontek transmitted. When we possessed flesh, we too experienced disorientation. One of the few advantages of biotransference, our consciousness now processes 12 dimensions simultaneously. Yeah, well, 12 dimensions sounds great until you realize you traded your ability to feel anything for the privilege. You can't taste food, can't feel warmth, can't experience pleasure. You're just processing information forever. That's not immortality, that's hell with better math. The Overlord stopped walking. For a long moment, the Overlord stood motionless, and Rick wondered if he just insulted his way into atomization. Behind him, Viridana's hand moved to her Stormbolter. Then Ahmontek turned, and when it spoke, there was something in the mathematical concepts that might have been recognition. You understand. Most organics celebrate our ascension or fear our power. You comprehend the prison we built for ourselves. The Overlord's eyes dimmed slightly. We were deceived. The C'tan promised godhood. They delivered damnation. Every day of these 60 million years, we have existed in a state you could not comprehend. Aware, conscious, but hollow. We remember sensation, but cannot experience it. We recall emotion, but cannot feel it. We are monuments to our own hubris. Rick met that ancient gaze and felt something unexpected. Sympathy. Not pity. These were genocidal robot skeletons who'd murder billions without hesitation. But sympathy, because he understood exactly what Ahmontek described. The curse of consciousness without connection. Existence without meaning. Wabba-lubba-dub-dub, Rick said quietly. Translation error. Clarify. It's just something I say. Rick shook his head. Look, I can't fix what the C'tan did to you, but I can tell you what I know about them, and maybe that information helps you finish what you started when you shattered those star bastards into shards. They entered a chamber that Rick's scanner identified as a materials fabrication facility. Massive structures hummed with contained energy, manipulating matter at the atomic level. In the center of the room sat a cylindrical container, and inside it Rick could see the dull black material he had been seeking. Blackstone. Warp-nullifying material. The substance that could let him escape this universe. Necrodermis-bonded nullification matrix, Ahmontek explained. You call it Blackstone. We crafted it during our war against the Old Ones, who used the immaterium as a weapon. This material exists in a state of active rejection. It does not simply resist psychic energy, it fundamentally negates the dimensional overlap between real space and the warp. This is exactly what I need, Rick said, pulling out his damaged portal gun. If I can integrate Blackstone into my quantum oscillator, I can create a stable dimensional tunnel that the warp can't corrupt. I'll be able to leave this nightmare universe. Before you repair your device, Ahmontek said,
you will fulfill your half of our agreement. Tell us, what is the current state of the Immaterium? Your data referenced something called chaos. Explain. Okay, so, here's the short version. The warp is worse than you remember. Way worse. When you went to sleep, it was just a psychic dimension. Dangerous, sure, but mostly empty. Now it's hell, literally. Organic species, especially humans, have spent the last tens of thousands of years filling it with their collective psychic trauma, and that trauma has crystallized into entities. Gods, basically, though they're more like psychic tumors that gained consciousness. Ahmontek's eyes flickered with what might have been concern. Elaborate.
Rick spent the next 20 minutes explaining the Chaos Gods. Khorne, the manifestation of rage and violence. Tzeentch, hope and ambition twisted into manipulation and conspiracy. Nurgle, despair and entropy personified as plague and decay. Slaanesh, excess and sensation taken to destructive extremes. He described how the Imperium's own faith had created a fifth power in the warp, the God Emperor, sustained by belief and sacrifice, fighting an endless holding action against chaos's advance. The warp isn't just dangerous anymore, Rick concluded. It's alive. It thinks, it plans, and it's hungry. Every psychically active species in the galaxy is feeding it, making it stronger. Your Blackstone tech? That's probably the only reason this galaxy hasn't been completely consumed. The pylons you built are still suppressing warp activity in some sectors, even after 60 million years. Ahmontek was silent for a long time. When it finally spoke, the mathematical concepts carried an edge of something that might have been horror. The organic species have weaponized their own collective unconscious. They have created gods from their own weakness. This is catastrophic. When we fought the old ones, the Immaterium was merely a tool. Now it is an existential threat to all reality. Yeah, welcome to the 41st millennium, Rick said. Everything is terrible, everyone is dying, and the corpse god on Terra is the only thing keeping humanity from extinction. It's cosmically depressing. And the Catan shards. Your databanks had references to containment facilities, places where Catan fragments are imprisoned. Some are held by the Imperium, who don't understand what they've got. Others are still locked in Necron Tesseract vaults. I pulled coordinates for 3 shard locations in this sector alone. Ahmontek processed this information, its internal systems humming. Behind it, Rick noticed additional Necron warriors had entered the chamber, not threateningly, but forming a perimeter. Something was happening. The Overlord was making a decision. Your information is valuable, Ahmontek said finally. More valuable than Blackstone samples. The Catan must be prevented from reconstituting. The Immaterium must be contained before it consumes all reality. This requires cooperation. Rick blinked. Wait, are you saying the Sautek dynasty will permit you to take Blackstone? We will also provide technical specifications for our nullification technology. In exchange, you will do something no organic has ever done. You will carry a message to the Imperium's leaders. Oh, hell no, Rick said, standing up. I'm not getting involved in your galactic politics. I'm taking my Blackstone and leaving. Ahmontek moved with inhuman speed, suddenly inches from Rick's face. Its eyes blazed with cold intensity. You do not comprehend the scale of what approaches. The Immaterium grows stronger every day. The organic species feed it with their wars, their suffering, their faith. Eventually, the barrier between real space and the warp will collapse completely. All matter will be consumed by psychic chaos. Even we, the undying,
will be vulnerable to entities that exist outside physical law. Not my problem, insisted Rick, but his voice lacked conviction. I can just portal to another universe where the warp doesn't exist. Can you? Amontek's tone carried something like challenge. Your portal technology creates tunnels through the immaterium to access alternate dimensions. You said so yourself. If the warp collapses into real space across all dimensions simultaneously, your portals will open into hell itself. Every universe you flee to will be infected. The warp is not bound by the constraints of single-universe physics. Rick's blood ran cold. He'd been so focused on escaping this universe that he hadn't considered the implications. If the warp was a universal constant, if it existed as an underlying layer beneath all dimensional barriers, then a catastrophic warp breach here could propagate across the entire multiverse. Every reality where psychic phenomena existed could become infected. You're saying this universe's warp problem could spread, that if things get bad enough here, it could metastasize across dimensional boundaries. Affirmative. The immaterium is not limited to your three-dimensional understanding of space. It exists in higher dimensions that your portal technology traverses. A complete warp breach would compromise the entire dimensional manifold. Rick sat back down heavily. Okay. That's actually a problem. A big problem. The kind of problem that makes my personal escape plan look like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. He ran the calculations in his head. If Amontek was right, and the math supported it, then the 40K universe's warp wasn't just a local threat. It was a multiversal infection waiting to spread. Every universe Rick might flee to could eventually be compromised by the same psychic corruption. What do you want me to tell the Imperium? Rick asked quietly. That the Necrons are not their primary enemy. Chaos is. That we possess technology to suppress the immaterium, but we lack the numbers to deploy it galaxy-wide. That cooperation, temporary, limited cooperation, is necessary for mutual survival. Rick laughed bitterly. You want me to convince a xenophobic, theocratic empire to work with the soulless robot skeletons they've been fighting for millennia? Lady, I've seen the Imperium's idea of cooperation. It involves flamethrowers and planet-killing weapons. Then convince them otherwise. You possess knowledge they do not have. You understand dimensional mechanics, warp theory, and the true scale of the threat. You are uniquely positioned to serve as intermediary. I'm not a diplomat, I'm a scientist. I solve problems, I don't, play politics.
Amontek tilted its head, a gesture that seemed almost organic in its curiosity. You solved the problem of negotiating with Necrons. You convinced me, an overlord who has eradicated entire species, to spare your life and provide you resources. If that is not diplomacy, I do not understand the concept. Rick wanted to argue, to tell the ancient robot that it was wrong, that Rick Sanchez didn't get involved in other universes' problems. But the words wouldn't come. Because Amontek was right. Rick had talked his way into this situation. He'd proven he could bridge the gap between radically different intelligences. And more than that, much as he hated to admit it, he was curious. The warp represented a fundamental challenge to everything he understood about physics. It was a dimension where consciousness rewrote reality, where faith had measurable effects, where the laws of causality were optional. If he could understand it, truly understand it, he might unlock principles that could revolutionize his own technology. Plus, if the warp really could spread across dimensional barriers, he had a vested interest in containing it. Fine, Rick said, finally. Fine, I'll take your message to the Imperium, but I'm doing this my way, and if it goes sideways, which it will, I reserve the right to say, I told you so, and bail. Acceptable. Amontek gestured, and several Necron warriors approached, carrying containers. Inside each container were samples of Blackstone, already cut and shaped for easy integration into technology. The Overlord also produced a data crystal that glowed with faint green light. Technical specifications for nullification pylon construction, simplified for organic comprehension. You will need this to convince your Imperium that cooperation is viable. Rick took the containers and the data crystal, his mind already racing through the modifications he'd need to make to his portal gun. With Blackstone integrated into the quantum oscillator, he could create warp-resistant dimensional tunnels. He could actually leave this universe. But something nagged at him. Something about the Overlord's behavior. The Necrons were logical, calculating. They didn't make emotional decisions. Yet Amontek had provided more than Rick asked for, had offered technical specifications that could fundamentally change the Imperium's position in galactic warfare. "Why are you really doing this?" Rick asked. "You hate organic life. You've spent millions of years dreaming of reclaiming the galaxy. Why hand over technology that could help your enemies survive?" Amontek was silent for a moment. When it spoke, the mathematical concepts carried something that might have been weariness. "Because we are tired, Rick SANCHEZ. 60 million years of existence without purpose. We awakened to find the galaxy infested with organic life, yes, but also to find something worse. The Ceton's corruption still lingers. The warp has grown strong, and we, the immortal Necrons, realize that we cannot reclaim this galaxy alone. We need allies, even organic ones." The word allies came out distorted, as if Amontek's translation protocol struggled with the concept. "We do not ask for trust. We do not ask for friendship. We ask for pragmatic cooperation against mutual threats. If the Imperium can be convinced of this, if other organic species follow, then perhaps this galaxy can survive long enough for us to find a cure for our condition, a way to reverse biotransference, to become..." The Overlord trailed off, but Rick understood. To become alive again. To feel again, to be something more than calculating machines in the shape of their former selves. "You want your souls back," Rick said softly. "That's what this is really about. You're hoping that if you help save the galaxy, maybe someone will figure out how to give you back what the Ceton stole." "Impossible," Amontek said. But there was something in its tone, a flicker of desperate hope that even millions of years couldn't completely extinguish. "Our souls were consumed. They cannot be recovered." "Maybe," Rick said. "Or maybe the warp changed the rules. Souls are psychic constructs, right? Energy patterns in the immaterium. If the warp is as active as you say, if consciousness can literally shape reality there, then maybe there's a way to reconstruct what was lost. It wouldn't be easy, it'd probably be insanely dangerous, but it might be possible." Amontek tilted its head, a gesture that seemed almost organic in its curiosity. "You solved the problem of negotiating with Necrons. You convinced me, an overlord who has eradicated entire species, to spare your life and provide you resources. If that is not diplomacy, I do not understand the concept." Rick wanted to argue, to tell the ancient robot that it was wrong, that Rick SANCHEZ didn't get involved in other universes' problems. But the words wouldn't come. Because Amontech was right. Rick had talked his way into this situation. He'd proven he could bridge the gap between radically different intelligences. And more than that, much as he hated to admit it, he was curious. The warp represented a fundamental challenge to everything he understood about physics. It was a dimension where consciousness rewrote reality, where faith had measurable effects, where the laws of causality were optional. If he could understand it, truly understand it, he might unlock principles that could revolutionize his own technology. Plus, if the warp really could spread across dimensional barriers, he had a vested interest in containing it. Fine, Rick said, finally. Fine, I'll take your message to the Imperium, but I'm doing this my way, and if it goes sideways, which it will, I reserve the right to say, I told you so, and bail. Acceptable. Amontech gestured, and several Necron warriors approached, carrying containers. Inside each container were samples of blackstone, already cut and shaped for easy integration into technology. The Overlord also produced a data crystal that glowed with faint green light. Technical specifications for nullification pylon construction. Simplified for organic comprehension. You will need this to convince your Imperium that cooperation is viable. Rick took the containers and the data crystal, his mind already racing through the modifications he'd need to make to his portal gun. With Blackstone integrated into the quantum oscillator, he could create warp-resistant dimensional tunnels. He could actually leave this universe. But something nagged at him. Something about the Overlord's behavior. The Necrons were logical, calculating. They didn't make emotional decisions. Yet Amontech had provided more than Rick asked for, had offered technical specifications that could fundamentally change the Imperium's position in galactic warfare. Why are you really doing this? Rick asked. You hate organic life. You've spent millions of years dreaming of reclaiming the galaxy. Why hand over technology that could help your enemies survive? Amontech was silent for a moment. When it spoke, the mathematical concepts carried something that might have been weariness. Because we are tired, Rick SANCHEZ. 60 million years of existence without purpose. We awakened to find the galaxy infested with organic life, yes, but also to find something worse. The Ceton's corruption still lingers. The warp has grown strong, and we, the immortal Necrons, realize that we cannot reclaim this galaxy alone. We need allies, even organic ones. The word allies came out distorted, as if Amontech's translation protocol struggled with the concept. We do not ask for trust. We do not ask for friendship. We ask for pragmatic cooperation against mutual threats. If the Imperium can be convinced of this, if other organic species follow, then perhaps this galaxy can survive long enough for us to find a cure for our condition, a way to reverse biotransference, to become. The Overlord trailed off, but Rick understood. To become alive again, to feel again, to be something more than calculating machines in the shape of their former selves. You want your souls back, Rick said softly. That's what this is really about. You're hoping that if you help save the galaxy, maybe someone will figure out how to give you back what the Ceton stole. Impossible, Amontech said. But there was something in its tone, a flicker of desperate hope that even millions of years couldn't completely extinguish. Our souls were consumed. They cannot be recovered. Maybe, Rick said, or maybe the warp changed the rules. Souls are psychic constructs, right? Energy patterns in the immaterium. If the warp is as active as you say, if consciousness can literally shape reality there, then maybe there's a way to reconstruct what was lost. It wouldn't be easy, it'd probably be insanely dangerous, but it might be possible.
Inquisitor Cassia Valorian stood in her private sanctum aboard the Unrelenting Truth, staring at the data crystal Rick had placed on her desk. The faint green glow illuminated her face, casting shadows that made her look older, wearier. Outside the viewport, the warp churned with impossible colors as the ship made its return journey to Imperial space. "You're telling me," she said slowly, carefully, "that you negotiated an alliance with the Necrons, that you offered them hope of soul restoration using warp mechanics, and that you believe this is somehow in the Imperium's best interest." Rick leaned back in his chair, flask in hand, looking more exhausted than Cassia had seen him. The 3 days since leaving Mortis 7 had aged him in ways that shouldn't be possible for someone with his augmentations. "I'm telling you that Amonatech was right. Chaos isn't just your problem, it's a multiversal threat. If the warp collapses into real space completely, it won't stop at your galaxy. It'll bleed through every dimensional boundary, infecting every universe where psychic phenomena exist, including mine. So you acted out of self-interest." "I always act out of self-interest," Rick said, "but sometimes self-interest and survival align. The Necrons have technology that can suppress the warp. Your Imperium has manpower and knowledge of chaos. Together, you might actually stabilize this nightmare before it metastasizes into something worse." Cassia picked up the data crystal, turning it over in her augmetic hand. Inside were detailed schematics for Blackstone pylon construction, nullification field generators, and warp suppression technology that the Mechanicus would take centuries to reverse engineer. It was knowledge that could change the balance of galactic power. It was also undeniable proof that Xenos cooperation could yield results that faith and firepower alone could not. It was heresy of the highest order. "The Inquisition exists to protect humanity from threats both external and internal. Xenos corruption, chaos taint, mutation, heresy. What you propose, working with the Necrons, it violates every principle we stand for." "Your principles are killing you," Rick said bluntly. "Your Emperor has been dying for 10,000 years. Your Imperium loses ground every day. Chaos grows stronger while you cling to dogma written by people who've been dead for millennia. At some point, you have to ask yourself, is ideological purity worth extinction?" Cassia was silent for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised Rick. She laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. "Do you know what the Inquisition's unofficial motto is, Sanchez? Innocence proves nothing. We operate in a galaxy where good intentions mean less than nothing, where mercy is weakness, where the only certainty is that humanity teeters on the edge of annihilation every single day." She set the data crystal down with deliberate care. "I have executed entire planetary populations on suspicion of corruption. I have condemned billions to save trillions. I have made choices that would drive most humans insane, all in service of humanity's survival." She looked directly at Rick, and her human eye was hard as diamond. "So when you ask if I can set aside ideology for survival, the answer is, I do that every damned day." Rick blinked. He had expected resistance, dogmatic refusal, maybe even an execution attempt. He hadn't expected pragmatism. "You're going to present the alliance proposal," he said, not quite believing it. "I'm going to present the intelligence, the data crystal, your report on Necron capabilities, and the strategic assessment of chaos as a multiversal threat. What the High Lords of Terra do with that information is beyond my authority. I will recommend they consider it carefully.
Because, as much as it pains me to admit, you're right. We are losing. The Emperor is failing. And if the Necrons truly offer functional warp suppression technology... She trailed off, but Rick understood. The Imperium would never publicly ally with Xenos, but quiet cooperation, limited information exchange, strategic non-aggression, that was possible. It was the kind of moral compromise that the Inquisition specialized in, doing terrible things in the shadows so humanity could maintain its self-righteous facade in the light. "You're less of a fanatic than I thought," Rick said. "I'm exactly as fanatical as I need to be. I believe the Emperor protects. I also believe he expects us to be intelligent about it." She gestured to Rick's repaired portal gun, which sat on the table between them. "Your device is functional now. The Blackstone integration was crude, but effective. You can leave whenever you wish."
Rick looked at the portal gun, his ticket out, his escape from this grim dark nightmare where everything was terrible and everyone was dying. He could fire it up right now, open a portal to literally any other universe, and never think about the 41st millennium again. But Amontek's words echoed in his mind. If the warp collapses into real space across all dimensions simultaneously, your portals will open into hell itself. Rick had spent his entire life running from consequences, dimension hopping whenever things got complicated, abandoning universes when they became inconvenient. He'd left behind destroyed civilizations, broken families, and catastrophic messes because none of it really mattered to him. He was Rick Sanchez. He was above it all. Except this time, running might not work. This time, the problem could follow him home. "I'm not staying. This isn't my universe, these aren't my people, and I don't do the whole save the galaxy thing." But I picked up his portal gun, checking the Blackstone integration one more time. "I'll share the technical specifications for warp-resistant portal technology. How to create dimensional tunnels that chaos can't corrupt. Consider it payment for the hospitality?" It wasn't much. It wouldn't solve the Imperium's problems or stop Chaos's advance, but it would give them one more tool, one more option, one more chance at survival. And maybe, that would be enough to prevent the kind of catastrophic warp breach that could threaten the entire multiverse. Cassia nodded slowly. "The Adeptus Mechanicus will canonize you as either a saint or a demon for that gift, possibly simultaneously." "Story of my life," Rick muttered. He stood, holstering the portal gun. "Check your tech priests to be, careful with the schematics. Portal technology in a universe where faith affects reality, that's a recipe for disaster. Some moron's gonna try to create a holy portal to the Emperor's side and accidentally open a gateway straight into the warp." "Noted." She extended her hand, her human one, not the augmetic. "You're a heretic, a dimensional anomaly, and possibly the most frustrating individual I've ever encountered. But you've provided valuable intelligence and technology that may aid humanity's survival. The Inquisition acknowledges this." Rick shook her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, the handshake of someone who'd made peace with moral ambiguity a long time ago. "Try not to let your civilization collapse before I figure out if the warp is actually spreading. I'd hate to dimension warp into my home universe and find chaos corruption waiting for me." "The Emperor protects," Cassia said, and this time it didn't sound like empty dogma. It sounded like a promise, a threat, a statement of absolute conviction from someone who'd seen the galaxy's worst horrors and chosen to keep fighting anyway. Rick activated his portal gun. The familiar green glow filled the sanctum, but this time it was different, more stable, less flickering. The Blackstone was working, creating a null field that pushed back against the warp's interference. The portal opened, a swirling vortex showing glimpses of another dimension, one where the sky wasn't the color of infected wounds, and the air didn't taste like machine oil and incense. He stepped toward it, then paused. Amontek was right about one thing, Rick said without turning around. You can't kill chaos with guns and faith alone. It's a psychic phenomenon fed by consciousness itself. The only way to defeat it is to either eliminate all consciousness in the galaxy, which is your Necron's original plan and also insane, or to fundamentally change the psychic landscape. Give people something to believe in that's stronger than despair, rage, and excess. We have the Emperor, Kasaya said. You have a corpse that's barely holding on, Rick corrected. What you need is an actual alternative. Hope, progress. Something that makes the future look worth living for instead of just surviving until you die. He glanced back at her. That's your real problem. Your Imperium has spent 10,000 years in managed decline, telling people that suffering is sacred and progress is heresy. No wonder chaos is winning. You've made despair your official policy. With that, Rick Sanchez stepped through the portal. It collapsed behind him with a sound like reality sighing in relief, leaving Inquisitor Kasaya Valorian alone with a data crystal full of Xenos technology, a report that would scandalize the Imperium's leadership, and the uncomfortable realization that a dimension-hopping heretic diagnosed humanity's fundamental problem in 30 seconds. She looked at the Emperor's Aquila engraved on her desk and whispered, "What would you have me do?" The Emperor, 10,000 light-years away on Terra, gave no answer. He never did. That was the burden of the Inquisition, to make impossible choices without divine guidance, to damn themselves so humanity might be saved. Kasaya picked up the data crystal and began composing her report. In the warp, Chaos Gods took notice of the soul that had escaped, the dimensional traveler who touched their realm and survived. They were patient. They could wait. Every universe was eventually consumed by chaos. Every dimension fell to entropy. This Rick Sanchez had merely delayed the inevitable. But in a tomb on Mortis 7, Overlord Amontek of the Satek dynasty reviewed the conversation records and allowed itself something it hadn't felt in 60 million years: anticipation. The organic had suggested soul restoration might be possible. The organic had planted a seed of hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to action, and the Necrons, for the first time since biotransference, had something to hope for. The galaxy was about to become much more complicated. And Rick Sanchez, stepping through dimensions with a flask in one hand and a portal gun in the other, allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. He'd survived the 41st millennium, made deals with killer robots, and potentially prevented a multiversal apocalypse. Not bad for a Tuesday, he muttered, and vanished into the infinite cosmos, leaving behind a universe that would never forget the smartest man who fell from the sky and taught them that even in the grim darkness of the far future, there might still be room for something resembling hope.
The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy that flows through stars, planets, and the vast emptiness between them. For thousands of years, the Jedi have studied this mystical field, learning to sense disturbances in its flow like ripples across still water. But what happens when something crashes through that web? Something that doesn't ripple the Force, but tears straight through it like a blade through silk. The anomaly appeared without warning above Coruscant at 0300 Standard Time. No hyperspace signature, no ship registry, no distress beacon, just a wound in space itself, bleeding darkness that poured into real space like smoke from a shattered dimension. The Jedi Temple's meditation chambers erupted in chaos as every Force sensitive on the planet city felt it simultaneously. a presence that registered as neither light nor dark, neither living nor dead, but something fundamentally other. Master Yoda's eyes snapped open in his chambers, his meditation shattered by the sensation of wrongness cascading through the Force. Across the temple, Mace Windu ignited his lightsaber on pure instinct before realizing the threat wasn't in the room with him. On the Senate floor, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine's practiced smile faltered for a microsecond as he felt something that shouldn't exist pierce through his carefully maintained masks. The dimensional tear hung in Coruscant's upper atmosphere for exactly 7 seconds before something fell through it. A figure wreathed in writhing shadows that seemed to devour the light of the city planet below. Sung Jin-Woo tumbled through the closing rift, his system interface flickering with corrupted data as 2 universes collided in his consciousness. Warning messages scrolled across his vision in fragmented text, half in his native language and half in symbols he'd never seen before. Dimensional stability, critical. Shadow Army status, 847 units detected. Warning, foreign energy interference. System recalibration required. He twisted mid-fall, instinct taking over as his body adjusted to the new physics of this reality. The air here felt alive in a way he'd never experienced, as if consciousness itself permeated the atmosphere. His shadows responded to his will, forming beneath him into a platform that arrested his descent 50 meters above a landing pad in Coruscant's upper levels. The platform dissolved as his feet touched solid durasteel, and Jin-Woo straightened, taking in his surroundings with the practiced calm of someone who'd faced dimensional gates and world-ending threats. Towering structures stretched endlessly in every direction, their surfaces glistening with running lights and holographic advertisements. Speeders zipped through aerial traffic lanes in organized chaos. The city felt impossibly vast, making even Seoul's densest districts seem provincial by comparison. But what struck Jin-Woo most wasn't the architecture, it was the feeling. That omnipresent energy in the air, pressing against his senses like a curious observer. "Not mana," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the distant hum of the city. His system flickered again, attempting to categorize the energy and failing. Jin-Woo reached into his inventory, thankfully still functional, and withdrew one of his daggers. The blade materialized in shadow-wreathed steel, its edge humming with familiar power. At least his core abilities remained intact. A warning pulse through his senses made him turn. 6 figures descended from the night sky, their approach silent but unmistakable to someone who'd learned to perceive danger before it arrived. They wore flowing robes in shades of brown and tan, and each carried a cylindrical object at their waist. His enhanced perception caught the details immediately. The way they moved with practiced grace, the discipline in their formation, the complete absence of killing intent despite their obvious caution.
Not enemies, not yet. The lead figure landed on the platform 20 meters away, a Kel-Dor whose face was obscured by an Antioch's breath mask. His companion, a human woman with dark skin and traditional Jedi robes, kept her hand near her lightsaber but didn't draw it. The other 4 spread out in a loose perimeter, professional but non-threatening. I am Plo Koon, Jedi Master of the Galactic Republic. Your arrival has caused considerable disturbance. We mean you no harm, but we must ask you to come with us to the Jedi Temple to answer some questions. Jin-Woo studied them,
his system finally providing some useful information as it began parsing local data from nearby communication networks. Sigilic, basic acquired. Jedi Order, galactic peacekeepers. Force, omnipresent energy field. Current location, Coruscant, galactic capital. So this galaxy had its own version of hunters and power structures. The energy he felt, this force, seemed to be their equivalent of mana, though far more pervasive. These Jedi were apparently this world's S-rank equivalents, peacekeepers who served a galactic government. Jin Wu had learned long ago that cooperation yielded better results than conflict when entering unknown territory. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Jin Wu replied, noting with satisfaction that his words translated automatically. The system was adapting faster than expected. Plo Koon's posture relaxed slightly. "Then we share a common goal. The temple has resources that may help you, but first we must understand the nature of your power. What you brought with you, it is unlike anything we have encountered." Jin Wu almost smiled at that. These Jedi could sense his shadow army, currently held in reserve within his shadow dimension. 847 soldiers, ranging from elite warrior ants to dragon-class shadows, all waiting for his command. To Force sensitives, they must feel like a massive void, living things that weren't alive, power that didn't draw from their precious force. I can explain, but it might be easier to show you, though I should warn you, what I do tends to make people uncomfortable. The Jedi exchanged glances. The human woman spoke for the first time. Her voice carried authority. "We've faced Sith alchemy and dark side rituals. Whatever you wish to demonstrate, we can handle it." Jin Wu wondered if that was true. The Sith, his system had flagged them as dark side Force users, this galaxy's version of villains who embraced emotion and power. He dealt with worse. Monarchs who commanded death itself, beings that devoured dimensions. If these Jedi thought his shadows were similar to Sith magic, they were in for a revelation.